How about this one? The color is nice. I froze when I heard the familiar voice coming from the baby section of a department store in San Diego. Yeah, it's good, but let's get a slightly bigger size. It was, without a doubt, Mark's voice. My husband, who was supposed to be battling sandstorms in the deserts of Dubai, was here, picking out clothes for a pregnant woman and her unborn child. Our baby is being born in America. Of course, he has to be born here. The words "our baby" stabbed me in the heart. I ducked behind a display rack and raised my phone with trembling hands. I switched it to silent to muffle the shutter sound and took a series of pictures. The sight of Mark pulling out his credit card, the sight of the pregnant woman leaning on his arm, their arms linked. They looked so natural and happy, as if they were mocking me, the woman who had spent an entire year dutifully caring for her mother-in-law. My heart felt like it was going to burst. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. They didn't know. I was watching everything, and I was a quiet, meticulous planner. Your support and likes give me the strength to create more stories. Hello, my name is Sarah Miller. At the beginning of a late winter, I turned 42. At the time, I was running a small gift and stationery shop near a local market in Chicago. It was a tiny shop, barely 100 square feet, but it was packed with everything from school supplies to greeting cards. Since we didn't have children, my routine was to open the doors at 7 a.m. and stay open until 9 p.m. When my regulars, elderly women from the neighborhood, came in to buy pencils for their grandchildren, I'd often hear, "How much for this one?" for my little girl. And every time, I'd reply, "Ma'am, it's just $1. Here, take an extra one on me and give them a free pencil." It was a neighborhood where only a few familiar faces came and went. My husband, Mark, worked overseas as a plant team manager for a major engineering firm. He was tall and quiet but had a strong sense of responsibility. He would leave for work at 6 a.m., and on the rare occasions he was home between projects, would come back around 9 p.m. to greet me with a simple, "You did a good job today, honey." On the surface, we were a typical married couple in our 40s. Childless, so our life was quiet, and visiting my mother-in-law on weekends was a regular routine. But then everything changed abruptly when she developed kidney failure due to complications from diabetes. At 77, she suddenly needed dialysis 3 times a week. I remember the first time the doctor at the hospital told us that regular dialysis was essential for her condition. She also needed meticulous guidance on her diet and medication. Mark asked with a serious expression, "So, she needs someone to look after her at home all day?" That's right. She's especially tired on dialysis days, so careful attention is required. From that day on, my mother-in-law's temper grew more volatile. It was understandable, given her poor health, but it wasn't easy for me. A daughter-in-law has her duties. Why are you still trying to run that little shop? Every time her voice echoed through the living room, I could only bow my head and say, "Yes, Mom." The daughter-in-law next door quit her job to take care of her mother-in-law. "So how can you be so careless?" Every time I heard that, my heart ached, but I endured it. It was true that my mother-in-law was sick, and someone needed to take care of her. This went on for over a month. Then, one evening, Mark came home from work and sat on the living room sofa, his expression more serious than usual. He seemed to think for a moment, as he loosened his tie, then said, "Sarah, the company wants me to join a plant project in Dubai." I stopped washing the dishes and turned around. Water dripped from my rubber-gloved hands. Dubai? How long is the project? About 2 years. Apparently the situation there was complex, so they were only assembling an experienced team. Mark sat down at the table and sighed. A deep wrinkle formed on his forehead. "Honestly, I don't want to go, but realistically, Mom's hospital bills are no joke, and thinking about retirement, I don't know when we'll get a chance like this again." I took off my rubber gloves and sat next to Mark. "But Dubai is so far. How often will you be able to come home in 2 years?" "I think I'll only get leave once or twice a year. But the pay is significant, so this opportunity will greatly improve our situation." Then I heard my mother-in-law's voice from her room. "What's all that noise out there?" My mother-in-law came out into the living room, leaning on her cane. Her face was swollen from her recent dialysis treatment, but her eyes were still sharp. Mark spoke politely, "Mom, The company has asked me to go to Dubai for a project. I think I should go. Dubai? You mean that place in the Middle East? Yes, that's right. It's a large plant construction site. A proud smile spread across my mother-in-law's face. Well, my son was chosen for such a big job? As expected of my boy. She tapped her cane and cheered. Of course, you have to go. You can't miss this opportunity. Sarah, you think so too, right? I hesitated for a moment. I was worried about the shop, and more than anything, I felt overwhelmed at the thought of taking care of my mother-in-law all by myself. But both Mark and his mother were looking at me. Yes, I think it's a good opportunity. See? Even my daughter-in-law understands. That's right. Sacrificing for the family. That's what a real man does. My mother-in-law looked at Mark and beamed with pride. From that night on, the house became busy. Mark prepared to go abroad, and I started to organize the shop. Closing the small stationery shop I had run for 13 years was not easy, but I had no other choice. The familiar old ladies came by to express their regret. Why is our Sarah's shop closing? Where will we buy our things now? I'm so sorry, ma'am. My mother-in-law is ill, so I have to take care of her. Well, can't be helped. Such a good daughter-in-law. The ladies brushed away their regrets and encouraged me. It was a story everyone in the neighborhood knew. At that time, I didn't realize what 2 years would mean. I just thought I had to endure it for the family. I thought Mark would have it just as hard. The night before he left, Mark said as he was packing his suitcase, "Sarah, I'm so sorry. I'll be fine taking care of Mom by myself. As hard as it is for us, it's much harder for her. Still, you have to manage everything alone for 2 years." Mark held my hand tightly. His hands were rough but warm. He said, "I really hope this works out. This opportunity will ease our worries about Mom's hospital bills, and we'll be able to live a little more comfortably." I hope so too. You should take care of yourself as well. On the day Mark left the country, I video called him at the airport to say goodbye and wish him a safe trip. His face was small on the screen, but his expression was resolute. He said, "I'll take good care of Mom, and I'll work hard to come back soon." Okay. Don't worry, have a safe flight. And that's how my long winter began. I woke up at 5 a.m. every day, prepared my mother-in-law's breakfast, and drove her to the clinic on dialysis days. Each session lasted over 4 hours, and waiting in the hospital lobby during those hours became my new routine. After dialysis, my mother-in-law would come home exhausted and lie down immediately. At those times, I would spend the day quietly doing housework. For the first few months, Mark called me regularly. His voice was mixed with the sound of desert winds and the loud machinery at the construction site. He would tell me, "The site is really harsh. The sandstorms are nonstop, and the temperature is over 100 degrees, making it hard to breathe. You're not in good health. Don't overwork yourself. How's Mom? She's going to her dialysis appointments on time." "Yes, don't worry. I'm taking good care of her. She's worried about you too." "Okay, tell her not to worry. I'll be back soon." The conversations went like that. Mark said it was hard, but he would try his best for the family, and I told him I would wait for him at home. At first, my mother-in-law was very worried too. My son is suffering so far away, so the daughter-in-law must take good care of the family. "Yes, Mom, I'll do my best to take care of him. My son went there to make money, so he must live frugally and not waste money." One day, while getting ready for dialysis, she boasted to the other patients, "My son is working on a big job in Dubai. I'm talking about a national project." "Oh, really? That's impressive." Of course, not just anyone gets chosen. You have to have experience to be selected. Taking care of my mother-in-law and driving her to the hospital became my daily routine. I woke up in the morning, prepared her meals, took her to the hospital, came home, and did all the housework. But something strange happened. As time went by, Mark's calls became less frequent. At first, he called every other day, but then it became twice a week, then once a week. The calls also got shorter. We used to talk for 30 minutes, but now he would hang up in less than 10. "I'm so busy I don't have time to call. I'm sorry, but I wish you could contact me more often, even for a little bit." "I understand. I'll try my best." Please bear with me a little longer. But his promise was not kept. As the winter nights grew longer, I often sat alone on the living room sofa, staring at my phone, waiting for the screen to light up. My mother-in-law was sleeping in her bedroom, and the house was quiet. In those moments, only the creaking of the house seemed unusually long. Sometimes I thought about calling Mark first, but the time difference and the thought of him being busy on site held me back. And so my nights grew longer and longer. An indescribable emptiness began to fill my chest. It had been about a year since he was supposedly dispatched to Dubai. One evening, as the winter rain lashed against the window, I was sitting at the dining table, carefully reviewing the monthly expenses. I had a habit of meticulously recording my mother-in-law's dialysis costs, living expenses, and everything else I spent each month. Thinking that I needed to be even more frugal while Mark was away, I made sure to keep every receipt. That day, as usual, I was checking my credit card statements one by one when something strange caught my eye. The name of a department store in San Diego stood out, and the cardholder was definitely Mark. It said date of use, a date a few weeks prior, amount $125. At first, I thought I had simply misread it. I tried to console myself by thinking that online payments were possible from Dubai, so that must be it. But as I looked closer, something didn't feel right. There was also a payment for a hotel in San Diego on the same day. The amount wasn't small either. My heart started to pound. My fingertips grew cold, and the hand holding the statement trembled slightly. No way. There must be some mistake. I muttered to myself and checked the other monthly statements, but more similar items appeared. There were credit card transactions from the San Diego area, with a separate purchase recorded each month. Then I heard my mother-in-law's voice from her room. "Sarah, get me some water." "Yes, Mom, just a moment." I quickly put away the papers and brought her some water. My mother-in-law had edema from the dialysis, so she drank a lot of water. "What were you looking at?" "Oh, I was just organizing the household accounts. Yes, you should manage the house well while Mark is away. You shouldn't be spending money on unnecessary things." "Yes, I know." After seeing my mother-in-law to her room, I returned to the living room and looked at the statement again. Something unsettling kept nagging at me. A few days later, something even more significant happened. A holiday gift basket arrived from Mark's company, and I was surprised to see the sender's details on the box. It read, "From all employees of the San Diego branch office." I couldn't understand why my husband, who was supposed to be working in Dubai, would be associated with a San Diego branch. He was supposed to be with the staff at the construction site. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering if Mark was really not in Dubai. As that thought took hold, everything started to seem suspicious. The lack of calls and the way each call ended abruptly filled me with unease. The next morning, I made a decision. I would check for myself. I searched online for short-term senior care services. I wanted to entrust my mother-in-law to them for just one day and go to San Diego. I called a few agencies, but it wasn't easy. "Hello. I'd like to inquire about caregiver services." "Yes, go ahead. My mother-in-law is on dialysis. Can you provide care for one day?" Dialysis patients require professional caregivers, and booking for a single day is not easy. It usually requires at least a week's notice. After looking into a few more places, I was lucky to find one that offered a one-day service. The price wasn't cheap, but I had no other choice. I carefully explained to my mother-in-law, "Mom, I have to go to the hospital tomorrow. Someone will come to help you for the day." "Are you sick?" she asked. "No, I just need to get an EKG done." My mother-in-law, who had been very tired lately, looked at me with suspicion, but didn't ask any more questions. That evening, I packed a small bag. I planned to go and confirm the facts. I also took the credit card statements and the company's delivery box, thinking I might need them as evidence. The next morning, I woke up early, quickly made my mother-in-law a meal, and then explained the precautions in detail to the caregiver. "It's not a dialysis day tomorrow, so please take good care of her. If she feels unwell, contact me immediately." "Yes, don't worry. I'll take good care of her." The caregiver was a kind-looking woman in her mid-50s. She had been in this line of work for a long time, so I felt I could trust her. As I said goodbye to my mother-in-law and left the house, my heart was heavy. I wondered if I was being overly suspicious. I wondered if I was doing something wrong to Mark, but I couldn't let my curiosity linger. In the taxi to the airport, I looked out at the Chicago landscape. Even though it was only 6 a.m., I could already see people heading to work. I used to open my shop at this hour, and I suddenly missed the days of running a stationery store. At least back then, I had my own work and my own space. On the flight to San Diego, I kept thinking, what if Mark really isn't in Dubai? If he's really somewhere else, why did he lie? Around 9 a.m. local time, I arrived at San Diego International Airport. The cool Pacific breeze hit my face, but it wasn't as cold as I expected. I looked at the address on the receipt and headed towards the downtown area. As I took a cab, the ocean outside the window was a flat, gray color. Was Mark really here? I took a few deep breaths as I got out and walked towards the department store. I didn't know what I would find, but I wanted to confirm the truth. Standing in front of the store, I checked the statement again. The date and time of use were clearly recorded. If Mark was really in Dubai, there was no way he could have used his card here at this time. Today, everything would be revealed. I walked towards the entrance of the store. My heart was pounding, but I couldn't turn back. I had come this far, so I had to check everything. As I went down to the underground parking garage, I tried to remember Mark's license plate number. If he was really here, his car would surely be here. The parking garage was vast and filled with cars. As I walked, scanning each car, my heart beat faster. Then, a familiar license plate caught my eye. In that moment, I froze. I stood still on the spot. It was definitely Mark's car. Not just the license plate, but even the small sticker on the rear bumper was the same. It was a small, heart-shaped sticker I had given him for our wedding anniversary. My hands grew cold and numb. My heart pounded in my ears. He was really here. It was hard to believe that my husband, who was supposed to be fighting sandstorms in the Dubai desert, working hard for his family, was right here in San Diego, California. I hid behind a pillar in the parking garage and waited. I didn't know when he would appear, but I wanted to be sure. After about an hour, I heard a familiar voice from a distance. "Did you park here?" It was Mark's voice, but he wasn't alone. A woman's voice also rang out. "Honey, I'm having a hard time. Let's go quickly." It was a young woman's voice, and it was quite affectionate. I cautiously peeked my head out from behind the pillar. Mark was standing there, and next to him was a young woman with a large belly, her arm linked with his. She looked to be in her late 20s or early 30s and was probably 7 or 8 months pregnant. I held my breath and watched the scene. I didn't want to believe it, but it was real. "Are you okay? Is it hard for you?" Mark asked, gently stroking the woman's back. The touch was so natural. "Yes, my belly is heavy these days, so it's hard to walk for a long time." "Then why didn't you wait in the car? Why did you follow me?" "I didn't want to be alone. We're picking out supplies, so let's look together." The words "we" and "together" stabbed my heart like a knife. The two of them got into the car, and I hid myself, watching which way they went. Fortunately, they seemed to be heading into the department store. I followed them, keeping a small distance. My heart was pounding, but I needed more concrete evidence. The department store was bustling with people on a weekend afternoon. Mark and the woman were walking among the families and couples shopping. The woman casually linked her arm with Mark's, and he took care of her solicitously, like a couple who had been together for a long time. I followed them from a distance. My heart ached, but I couldn't stop looking. The two of them entered the children's supplies section. I stood near the entrance and watched them. Mark was looking at strollers, and the woman was looking at baby clothes. It was the most normal and natural scene of expectant parents. I cautiously entered the store. I blended in with the other customers, close enough to hear their conversation. "How about this? The color is pretty," the woman said, holding up a yellow infant outfit. "Yeah, it's nice, but let's get a bigger size. The baby will grow fast." "You're so meticulous," the woman playfully pinched Mark's arm. "The baby isn't even born yet. and you're already worrying. Of course. It's our baby, she said again. Our baby. I hid behind a display case and continued to listen. But how long are you going to be so indecisive? When the baby is born, you'll be even busier. Just be patient a little longer. It'll all be sorted out when the project is over. When are you going to sort out the house in Chicago? The house in Chicago? You mean there's a house in Chicago I don't know about? That'll be sorted out soon. It's not the right time now. And our baby is being born in America. Of course, he should be born here. I got goosebumps all over my body as I listened to that conversation. To hear that he had another house in Chicago, and that he was planning to have a child with that woman, I couldn't listen anymore. I left the area and went to the restroom. My face in the mirror was pale. My hands were shaking so much I could barely drink some water. I tried to calm myself down for a few minutes. Then I went back to the store. This time, I needed evidence. I took out my phone and cautiously approached them. I pretended to look at other items while turning on the camera. Mark and the woman were at the cash register, paying for a few baby clothes. I took a series of pictures of Mark taking out his card and the woman leaning on his arm. I put my phone on silent to avoid making a sound, and took a few more shots, including a picture of their backs as they walked out together. After they left the store, I stood there for a long time. It was hard to accept that everything I had believed for the past year was a lie. The video calls he made from the Dubai desert, the sound of sandstorms and machinery in the background, the phone calls. It was all a staged lie. I stumbled out of the store and sat down on a bench. My legs were so weak I couldn't stand any longer. I looked at the photos I had just taken on my phone. Mark's face was clear, and the pregnant woman's form, everything was real. Then I heard Mark's voice again. Jessica, let's take a break over there. I now knew her name was Jessica. Yeah, good. I'd like to sit down. I lowered my head and watched them walk past. Mark walked carefully, gently supporting Jessica's back. I had never seen such a sight before, not once in our 13 years of marriage. Suddenly, a surge of anger washed over me. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run up and slap Mark, but I didn't. I watched them with a calm, serene heart. Disappointment was greater than anger, betrayal greater than sadness. I quietly stood up. It was now clear what I had to do, not cry or sigh. I had to prepare calmly. On the flight back to Chicago, I organized the photos I had taken that day. I even double-checked the copy numbers on my credit card statements. This was just the beginning. Just as Mark had deceived me and his mother all this time, I planned to deceive him and prepare for it. That day, I promised myself that I would no longer live as a naive daughter-in-law. Looking out the plane window at the passing scenery, I planned my next move. Mark didn't yet know how far I had gone, and I intended to keep it from him. At least, until I had everything ready. For a few days after returning from San Diego, I lived as usual. I made my mother-in-law's breakfast, took her to dialysis, and then came home to clean and do laundry. On the outside, I pretended that nothing had happened. But inside, I was different. Every night, I reviewed the photos I had taken in San Diego and planned my next move. My mother-in-law would often ask if she noticed something different about me. Sarah, what's wrong with you these days? You don't look well. No, Mom, I'm just a little tired. Call Mark. You haven't been in touch much lately. Every time I heard those words, my heart ached, but I managed to hide my feelings. After about a week, I finally made up my mind. I woke up at 4 a.m. and quietly packed my bags. I put only my clothes and important documents into a suitcase, the photos from San Diego, copies of the credit card statements, and important papers I had received when I got married. I had already prepared for this. I contacted my brother-in-law, David, explained the situation, and told him I needed help for a while. I had already signed up for a senior care service. I left a note for my mother-in-law. There's an urgent matter, so I'll be away for a few days. David will help, and a caregiver will come. I'm sorry. That was it. I couldn't explain any more, and I didn't want to. At 5 a.m., I quietly opened the door and left. The cold air hit my face, but it didn't feel as cold as I expected. It felt like I was finally free from the burden that had been weighing me down. I went to a studio apartment I had looked at beforehand. It was a small room on the outskirts of Chicago, but it was perfect for me to live alone. I unpacked my bags, and it was around 9 a.m. It was time to start preparing in earnest. I searched for private investigators online. Among the many agencies, Frank Russo's investigation office caught my eye. Many reviews said they were thorough and reliable. I called and made an appointment. Hello, I'd like to request a private investigation. Can you briefly explain the matter? It's an investigation into my husband's infidelity. Okay. Can you come in at 2 p.m. tomorrow? That afternoon, I met Frank Russo. He looked to be in his late 50s and said he was a retired police officer. He didn't say much, but he listened to my story very carefully. When I showed him the photos I had taken in San Diego, he nodded. The evidence is solid, but this alone may not be enough. We need a more detailed investigation. What kind of investigation? We need to find out where your husband actually lives, when his relationship with that woman began, and his financial situation. Investigator Frank Russo explained in a calm voice. In particular, you mentioned a house in Chicago, right? That could be very important evidence. How much will it cost? The basic investigation fee is about $1,000. It could be more if further investigation is needed. However, the photos you took yourself will likely shorten the investigation time considerably. I signed the contract on the spot. 2 days later, I went to see a divorce lawyer. Lawyer Eleanor Vance was a calm, composed woman of about 45. She said she understood the feelings of older adults well because she had handled many divorce cases. Please explain the situation in detail. I told her everything from the beginning, step by step. I wrote down everything, from Mark's dispatch to Dubai to what I had witnessed in San Diego. Lawyer Eleanor Vance listened to my story and took meticulous notes. She said, "Your husband has been living a double life, using a fake dispatch as a cover, and he even got his mistress pregnant." Yes, that's right. So there are sufficient grounds for divorce. I think you'll be entitled to a significant portion of the assets and alimony. But there's one important thing. The lawyer took off her glasses, wiped the lenses, and said, "From now on, you need to focus on procedure, not emotion. Even if you're angry and feel wronged, for those feelings to be accepted by the court, they need to be proven with evidence and procedure." Those words hit me hard. Yes, I understand. Please refrain from contacting your husband for the time being. If he finds out, he might destroy evidence or hide assets. The lawyer's advice was clear. We will work with the private investigator to gather all the evidence, and then we will proceed with the legal procedures at that time. When I left the office, I felt strangely calm. It was reassuring to have a professional's help with a problem I had been struggling with alone for a long time. Back in my room, I sat at my desk and reviewed everything that had happened. I realized how foolish I had been for the past year to believe that Mark was in Dubai. I had been so focused on taking care of my mother-in-law that I hadn't paid close attention to what he was doing. But now things were different. Investigator Frank Russo sent me a preliminary report a week later. In fact, my husband rarely went to Dubai. He was mainly based in Chicago, working on a redevelopment project in San Diego, and he had been living with that woman for the past 7 months. So it's highly likely that all the calls he made to me were made from San Diego. The background noise could have been easily manipulated. It was only then that I felt like all the pieces of the puzzle were finally falling into place. I also checked the house in Chicago. It was a condo in a high-rise downtown, registered in her name, but my husband was the one who had signed the lease. The evidence was piling up. That night, for the first time, I hoped that Mark wouldn't call. Before, I would have been worried if I hadn't heard from him for a day, but now I was actually relieved that he wasn't calling. It seemed he still didn't know I had left the house. A few days later, I got a call from David. "Sarah, Mom is looking for you. Where are you?" "I'm out for a bit on an urgent matter." "How is she?" "The caregiver from the nursing home is taking good care of her. But why did you suddenly leave?" David's voice was full of suspicion, but I brushed it off. "Just a little longer. I'll be back soon." It was a lie. I had no intention of going back to that house. Now, all that was left was the final step, the final consultation with lawyer Eleanor Vance, and the start of all the legal procedures. That night, I told myself, I will not call Mark anymore. I will fight in silence and with documents. I was a little proud of myself for choosing procedure over evidence and lamentation over evidence. About a month after finalizing the legal procedures, I suddenly received a call from the hospital. It was 4 a.m. I woke up from a deep sleep and answered the phone to the urgent voice of a nurse. Are you the patient's guardian? The condition of patient Helen Miller has suddenly worsened. My heart sank. Can you come right now? I was terrified. If I went to the hospital now, David would be there, and I would have to explain to his mother why I had left home. But thinking that this might be my last chance, I got dressed and went to the hospital. David was already in front of the intensive care unit. He looked at me with red, swollen eyes and said, "Sarah, Mom was looking for you. Where have you been?" I'm sorry. There was an urgent matter. I could no longer make excuses. The doctor came out and explained the situation. Her kidney failure has progressed rapidly. Even with dialysis, the toxins are no longer being removed, and her heart is also under strain. I could barely hear the doctor's words. When I entered the ICU, my mother-in-law was on an oxygen mask. Her face was so changed that I could hardly recognize her at first. But she must have heard my footsteps because she slowly opened her eyes. "Sarah, you're here." Her voice was weak. "Yes, Mom, I'm here." I held her hand. It was cold and dry. "You left home, didn't you?" Tears welled up in her eyes. "Why did you do that?" I couldn't bring myself to answer. David was there, and more than anything, in her condition, it was hard to tell her the truth. I just needed to clear my head a bit. "I needed to clear my head," she said, gasping for breath. "That fool, Mark, he's been acting so suspicious." I was startled by her sudden words. "He's supposed to be in Dubai, but packages from all over are arriving. This isn't the first or second time. You mean you knew?" Still, I pretended not to know because I'm his mother. Her voice grew smaller, afraid that telling her daughter-in-law would only hurt her. "I'm sorry, Sarah. Did I push you too hard?" In that moment, tears streamed down my face. It was surprising that she knew everything, but it was even more heartbreaking that she had pretended not to know because she was worried about me. "It's okay, Mom. Everything's okay. My son did a foolish thing. A daughter-in-law like you. Why?" She closed her eyes, unable to forget the words she had said. That night, she passed away quietly. It was the last moment of her 7-year life. She passed away peacefully, with David and me by her side. As I prepared for the funeral, I had mixed feelings. I was sad, but her last words to me remained. The funeral was simple, no frills, in keeping with her personality. Mark appeared as the mourners came and went. I hadn't seen him in a black suit in a long time. He was the first husband I had seen in months. "Mom." Mark knelt before the portrait. Then he came up to me and asked, "Sarah, what were her last words?" "She didn't say anything special," I answered shortly. I didn't think it was necessary to relay her last words to Mark. "But why haven't you been home?" David asked. "I heard you've been away for a month." Mark's voice was full of suspicion. "I had something urgent to do." "What was so urgent?" "I'll tell you later." I didn't want to say any more. If it hadn't been for the funeral, I would have told him everything right then and there, but I couldn't do that in front of his mother. Mark raised his voice in front of the mourners. "How can a daughter-in-law not be present when her mother-in-law passes away? Isn't that a complete dereliction of duty?" The relatives started to whisper. Some looked at me with pity, while others seemed to take Mark's side. David intervened. "Brother, now is not the time to talk about that." In front of Mom. But Mark continued to blame me. When Dubai asked me to take care of his mother, who was it that agreed? And only when his mother passed away did I say it. I listened in silence. I wanted to argue, but I held back. After all, everything would be revealed soon enough. A few days after the funeral, there was a gathering to organize my mother-in-law's belongings. As my sister-in-law and I were cleaning her room, we found a small envelope with my name on it. "I think Mom prepared this for you." I opened the envelope and found 2 savings account passbooks, an insurance policy, and a small note. The two passbooks contained more money than I expected. It was all the money my mother-in-law had saved her entire life. The insurance policy listed me as the beneficiary. I don't know when she changed it, but it was clear she had done it with me in mind. On the note, my mother-in-law's shaky handwriting read, "Sarah, this is for all your hard work. I'm sorry." As soon as I read that short note, tears streamed down my face. She had prepared everything before she passed away. She knew I had left home and about Mark's lies. My sister-in-law was speechless after reading the note. "Sarah, it seems Mom was really worried about you." Actually, she was disappointed too. Disappointed? She once told me. She wondered if her son was really in Dubai, and that something was wrong. She knew everything. That day, I returned to my room with the things my mother-in-law had left me. As I looked through the passbooks, I felt my mother-in-law's final thoughts. With his apology, he had given me a new start. Now, only the final step remained, the final meeting with lawyer Eleanor Vance, to start all the legal procedures. Reading the last letter my mother-in-law left me, I was determined to stop procrastinating and get this done. I had completely let go of my resentment towards her. Instead, my anger towards Mark became even clearer. I was determined to start anew with the last words he left me. After the memorial service for my mother-in-law, I began the legal process in earnest. Together with lawyer Eleanor Vance, I simultaneously filed for divorce, division of assets, and alimony at the family court. I also submitted all the evidence gathered from Frank Russo's investigation. Mark probably realized I knew everything after receiving the complaint. When the first trial was scheduled, I went to the courthouse in a black suit. It was a new outfit I had bought with the money my mother-in-law had left me. When I met Mark in the courthouse hallway, he looked very flustered. "Sarah, what the hell is this? Why a sudden divorce lawsuit?" "Let's talk in court," I replied calmly and handed him the papers. When I entered the courtroom, there were more people than I expected. The judge, lawyers for both sides, and a few people sitting in the audience. Mark's lawyer was the first to argue. He argued that the plaintiff, Sarah Miller, had unilaterally left home, neglecting her mother-in-law, and that this, which resulted in her being left alone and passing away, constituted a neglect of a daughter-in-law's duties. Mark's lawyer countered my leaving home first. The defendant, Mark Miller, was unavoidably absent from home due to an overseas assignment, not an abandonment of his family. Hearing that, I felt bitter. He was still trying to maintain the lie of being dispatched to Dubai. Now it was lawyer Eleanor Vance's turn to counter. The defendant falsely claimed to be dispatched overseas, but in fact, he resided in the United States and has maintained that position. She presented each piece of evidence gathered by investigator Frank Russo. Mark's face grew paler and paler as he looked at the records of his work in San Diego, the receipts for his apartment rental there, the credit card transaction histories, and even the photos he had taken himself. In particular, this photo clearly shows the defendant purchasing baby supplies with a pregnant woman. The court carefully examined the photos. Mark and Jessica were clearly visible together, and he was seen using his credit card at the checkout counter. Furthermore, the defendant signed a lease for a condo in downtown Chicago in his mistress's name, using it as a hideout for his double life. Mark bowed his head as each piece of evidence was presented. The judge asked Mark, "How does the defense explain this?" Mark's lawyer replied, "At this stage, a review of the stock price data is necessary. It was basically a statement of surrender." The second trial was about the division of assets. The documents prepared by lawyer Eleanor Vance were even more detailed. For 13 years of marriage, the plaintiff devoted herself to caring for her mother-in-law and shouldered all the housework. However, the defendant, under the false pretext of an overseas assignment, betrayed the image of the family. Furthermore, the defendant used a significant portion of his allowance and salary from the company to maintain his marital relationship, which constitutes an unjust appropriation of joint property. The court issued its ruling after a comprehensive review of all the submitted evidence. The court acknowledges the defendant Mark Miller's infidelity and the misappropriation of living expenses during the period of the false overseas assignment, and orders that the plaintiff be granted 70% of the joint property and that the defendant pay $50,000 in alimony. As soon as I heard the verdict, my heart felt like it was unclenching. It felt like the pain of the past year had been legally recognized. Mark continued to resent me, even after the verdict. "Sarah, I never thought you'd do this. We were together for 13 years, he said. 13 years. Of those, how many were real?" I asked Mark for the first time. Lying about being in Dubai and having a child with another woman were all betrayals to me. The situation was complicated, so no more excuses are needed. A few weeks later, I started volunteering at a senior center. I used the money my mother-in-law had left me to establish the Helen Miller Long-Term Dialysis Patient Support Fund and decided to be directly involved in its management. The work at the community center gave me a special meaning. Helping the elderly who came to the hospital alone allowed me to slowly resolve my past issues. One afternoon, as I was leaving the community center after finishing my volunteer work, Mark was waiting for me. I was surprised to see him kneeling on the steps in front of the center. "Sarah, please withdraw the charges." I was wrong. Passers-by stopped one by one to watch. Mark's voice was full of desperation. "Let's start over. Back to how we were." I looked down at Mark and was lost in thought for a moment. The eager anticipation of my wedding 13 years ago, the simple joy of running a stationery shop, the lonely nights I endured while caring for my mother-in-law, all those memories flashed through my mind. But I was different now. I would no longer live in anyone's shadow. My voice was calm but firm, and what you did to me will not be forgiven just by kneeling. Mark remained kneeling and clung to me, but I didn't stay any longer. People passing by the welfare center looked at the kneeling man with curiosity. Some even whispered. I walked away without looking back. I remembered that the last note my mother-in-law left me. "This is to repay your hardships." Those words gave me courage. Now, it was truly a new beginning. Instead of blaming or hating someone, it was the beginning of a time when I could live my own life. But it wasn't completely over yet. Mark was not one to give up easily. I knew he might harass me in other ways. However, I was no longer afraid. The victory in court had given me confidence. Above all, my mother-in-law's last words held a firm place in my heart. After the verdict was finalized, I began to organize my in-laws' house. Most of the house now belonged to me. According to the division the court had recognized, Mark could no longer object. Entering the house after such a long time felt strange. The house, which had been empty for over a year, was covered in dust, and traces of time were everywhere. On the living room wall were photos of my mother-in-law, Mark, and me. The bright expressions from our early days of marriage now looked faded in the old frames. I took them down one by one and organized them. They were too painful to be called mere memories. I also had to clean my mother-in-law's room. Her clothes and household items were still there, and every touch brought back memories of her. I even found small gifts I had given her. A hat, a wristwatch, even the dried carnations I had given her on Mother's Day. They were all things she had treasured. Looking at those items made me feel complicated. There were some sad memories, but I could still feel that my mother-in-law had cared for me in her own way. After finishing the arrangements, I put the house up for sale through a real estate agent. It was an old townhouse on the outskirts of Chicago, but the location wasn't bad, so a buyer came along faster than I expected. The moment I signed the contract, I felt like it was finally over. "Congratulations. It was a good deal," the agent said with a smile, but I didn't feel too sad. I just felt like a chapter had been closed. The first thing I did after receiving the money was to pay off all my debts. I paid off the remaining hospital bills for my mother-in-law, my moving expenses, and even my personal investigation costs. When I paid the final fee to lawyer Eleanor Vance, she said, "Thank you for all your hard work. You look completely different from when you first came." "How do I look different? You seemed quite withdrawn then, but now you look very confident. You seem to have found your life." Hearing that really moved me. I wouldn't have dared to make such a bold decision before. After everything was settled, I went to the senior center. I had an appointment with Brenda Hayes, a social worker there, to discuss the details of setting up the fund. "Sarah, you said you were coming today, right? I've been waiting for you." Brenda Hayes was a warm woman in her late 40s. She was a seasoned social worker with over 20 years of experience. Announcing the establishment of the Helen Miller Long-Term Dialysis Patient Support Fund is truly meaningful. We sat in the conference room and talked in detail. I heard your mother was on dialysis, and since you've taken care of her, you must understand the help she needs. That's right, the cost of dialysis is not cheap, and when you add in transportation and caregiving costs, it's really difficult for those who are struggling financially. I explained the fund management plan I was considering. I planned to start with $25,000. We could start by helping those who need urgent monthly dialysis support, right? That's a significant amount. Brenda Hayes said in surprise. This amount is usually small for individual donations, but it has a special meaning to me. It's the money my mother-in-law left me. I received detailed advice on the fund's establishment process and operating methods. The paperwork was quite complicated, but Brenda Hayes helped me with dedication. All the procedures will be completed in about a month. Then we can start the support work in earnest from the beginning of next year. In addition to establishing the fund, I also decided to volunteer regularly at the welfare center. I wanted to share my experiences by counseling and supporting dialysis patients. Can you come twice a week? I think the seniors would enjoy talking to someone who has gone through similar experiences. Yes, I'd like to participate as much as I can within the time I'm given. Since I started working at the welfare center, I've met a lot of new people. There was one person who particularly impressed me. It was a grandmother in her 70s who lived alone and was on dialysis. My daughter-in-law only takes care of her own mother and doesn't even think about her mother-in-law, she would often say. But please understand, her and her daughter-in-law are also struggling financially. No matter how hard it is, it's not wrong to say hello. My son is the same way, and every time I heard that, I thought of my mother. She must have been unhappy with me, but I was grateful that she had endured it to the end. The fund was established, and it was the day we selected the first recipients. I reviewed the applicants' cases with Brenda Hayes, and they were all in very difficult situations. This person is an elderly person who can't afford the cost of dialysis with just their Social Security. This person's son lost his job, and their family's financial situation suddenly worsened. It was heartbreaking to hear each person's story. They were all facing similar hardships to what my mother-in-law and I had gone through. I think we should start by supporting the 3 people who need help the most. On the day I delivered the first grant, I visited the hospital in person. Thank you so much. I was so worried about the dialysis machine this month, but a man in his 70s greeted me with tears in his eyes. You're absolutely right. My mother was also a dialysis patient. You are carrying on your mother's legacy. Is that so? I'm even more grateful. She would be so happy to see you in heaven. Hearing that, I really felt like my mother was watching me from heaven. As the foundation work began in earnest, I became busier and busier. Balancing volunteer work at the welfare center and fundraising, the days passed quickly, but that busy schedule actually made me feel good. It was rewarding to be able to help others. Above all, I was relieved that I didn't have time to think about Mark or the past. One day, as I was leaving my work at the welfare center, Kim Young-hee said, "Sarah, your expression has gotten so much brighter these days. You're completely different now from when you first came." Really? Yes. You seem to have gained a lot of confidence, and it's a good change. Hearing that really moved me. I used to be very cautious and timid, but now I could express my thoughts with confidence. 3 months after the fund was established, the welfare center gave me a small plaque of appreciation. It read, "To Sarah Miller, founder of the Helen Miller Fund, for her contributions to improving community welfare." I imagined my mother would have been so proud to receive this plaque. It was moving to see the fund established in her name being recognized in this way. We had a small ceremony with the community center staff, and that's when I was introduced to a new person. "Sarah, let me introduce you to Dr. David Chen. He is a specialist who is joining us for our free health checkup program." Dr. David Chen looked to be in his mid-40s. He was tall and had a calm demeanor. "Hello, I'm Sarah Miller." "Hello, I'm David Chen. I heard you're starting a foundation. That's very meaningful, thank you. I also heard you do a lot of volunteer work." "I just do health checkups for the elderly. It's nothing big." We exchanged greetings, and naturally struck up a conversation with Dr. David Chen. He didn't say much, but I could feel that he was a warm person. I thought that we would be talking to each other often at the welfare center in the future. Time passed, and a few years later, it was spring. I had become a full-time employee at a senior center, in charge of counseling and supporting long-term dialysis patients. The Helen Miller Fund had also helped many people, playing a small but important role in the community. Going to work at the center every morning was a joy. I no longer had to worry about what others thought or walk carefully like before. I just walked with a light heart, knowing that I was doing something helpful for someone. The people at the center were now like my family. Brenda Hayes still treated me warmly, and the elderly also welcomed me warmly. "Sarah, you're early again today." "Yes." "Ma'am, are you here for your checkup today?" "Yes, I heard Dr. Chen is coming. That young doctor." She smiled and said, "Dr. Chen is Dr. David Chen. We had met a few years ago and often talked at the community center, and soon we had become close." Dr. David Chen came to the community center twice a month for free health checkups. Despite his busy hospital schedule, he never missed a session and treated the elderly with the utmost care. That day, the checkups started early in the morning. I was in charge of reception and counseling, and Dr. David Chen saw the patients. "Your blood pressure is a bit high. You should avoid salty foods and take light walks frequently." "Yes, sir, but my knees hurt. Can I walk?" "Just walk slowly. Don't overdo it." He took care of each elderly patient so carefully. He was never rushed and kindly explained all my questions. At lunchtime, he and I would often have tea at a small cafe near the welfare center. At first, we only talked about work, but as time went on, we started sharing personal stories as well. "Sarah, how did you end up doing welfare work?" he once asked cautiously. "It was because of a personal experience. My mother-in-law was on dialysis." "Ah, so this work must have a special meaning for you." "Yes. I hope that others will go through the same difficulties as me, perhaps a little less." The teacher also shared a little bit about his story. She said she had divorced a few years ago and was living alone, but now she found meaning in volunteer work. She said she felt better helping others. "It's much better than living alone." I feel the same way. I never knew that being needed by others could be so rewarding. Through these conversations, we got to know each other a little better. That day, after the health checkups were over, we had tea at a cafe. Outside the window, I could see the cherry blossom petals fluttering in the wind. "Sarah," the teacher called out, his voice more serious than usual. "Yes, if it's not too much trouble, would you mind spending some time with me?" I was momentarily taken aback by the sudden question. Spending time together is not a special promise or anything. It's just a relationship where we walk together like this. Slowly, without rushing, the teacher's voice was cautious. I could feel that he wasn't trying to pressure me. I looked out the window for a while. I saw people passing by, couples strolling under the cherry blossom trees, families with their children. In the past, I would have hesitated. My heart had been so hurt that it would not have been easy to open up. But now it was different. I had spent the past few years finding myself, and I knew I could be happy without relying on anyone, so I could respond more naturally. "Yes, that sounds nice." A relieved smile spread across the teacher's face. "Really?" "Yes. But I want to take it slow too. No rushing." "Of course." "I agree." As we were leaving the cafe that day, the teacher said, "Talking to Sarah makes me feel comfortable, because I don't feel pressured to force myself to do something. I feel the same way. When I'm with you, I feel like I can be myself." That was the beginning. There were no flashy confessions or sparkling rings, but that quietness gave me a sense of comfort. A few months later, I moved into a small apartment. It was a sunny house near the welfare center. Teacher Seo Yeon-woo, who came to help me with my move-in chores on my first day away from home, said, "This house is so warm. It suits Sarah well. Thank you." For the first time in a long time, I feel like I have a home. I put a picture of Sarah's mother in the living room. She was smiling, much brighter than before. I think Sarah would be happy to see her. I nodded in agreement with her words, as I truly thought she would be happy. As my mother-in-law's last words, I am now turning the pain I suffered into help for others. On my way home, I muttered to myself, I finally feel like I'm standing on my own timeline. The wounds of the past have not completely disappeared. Sometimes, memories come to mind. But those memories no longer hold me back. Instead, those experiences have made me stronger and helped me understand the pain of others. Above all, I can now live proudly as Sarah Miller, no longer in anyone's shadow. My relationship with David Chen is slowly deepening, and my work at the Social Welfare Center is also going well. Every time I see the people who receive help from the Helen Miller Fund recover, I think my mother must be smiling from heaven. That's how my new spring began. A new beginning is possible at any age, in any situation. The moment you stand on your own 2 feet with your own name, not in someone else's shadow, your real life begins. I hope that Sarah's story will give a little courage to those who are going through a difficult time. You are also precious and deserve to be loved. If today's video brought you even a little comfort, please subscribe to the channel. More interesting and moving stories will be shared every day. Please share your story in the comments and have a wonderful day.